Okay, welcome to the Hero Report podcast. My name is Ari Cohen. I'm a professor of political science at the University of Nebraska. And with me early in the morning over in Australia is my friend Matt Langdon of the Hero Construction Company. Today, I'm excited to say, I think this is a first for us, Matt. We're recording a Hero Report podcast with people from 3 continents. I don't think we've ever done that before. And we somehow managed to work the scheduling out because coming to us from London, we have Dan Edwards. So this is very exciting. Matt, hello. How are you?
I'm well. I think it is our first time 3 continents. We may have had Europe, North America, and maybe we had Drew on the show at one point when he was in Mexico, but that's still North America, isn't it?
Yeah.
Technically. So yeah, we'd like to welcome Dan. Dan is, I think, the founder of Parkour Generations in London, and I encountered him through Chris McDougall, who was at the Hero Roundtable a few months ago, and it sounds like they have a fairly decent friendship there, because I think Dan is going to be joining Chris on some of the upcoming book tour. So Dan, can you just give us an introduction into how you got to be where you are now and what you're doing right now?
Yeah, sure, man. I don't really know, to be honest, how I got here, but it's kind of a long, winding path. I guess to try and make it really concise, when I was very young, like most boys, boys of that generation, maybe I grew up kind of wanting to find out what I could do, and sort of wanted to make myself as capable and as sort of effective and fearless as possible. Trying to emulate the kind of heroic archetypes that we grew up reading about and watching, and all that sort of stuff. So I kind of grew up training myself in martial arts and seeking out these first of all those kind of concepts. And then sort of movement and sort of strength development concepts, and just generally trying to be really effective. Was really heavily into the martial arts I still am, I suppose, but for a long, long time. And then ended up finding parkour about 12 years ago now. And back then it was really small. It was really kind of a fledgling discipline. There was nothing really known about it. Very few people in the world doing it before YouTube and all that, of course. But that was a sort of natural progression for me in terms of my training, in that it was a whole new level of effectiveness and physical and mental capability that I hadn't really acquired yet. So back then that stuff to me was a whole new level. So I threw myself into it and kind of added that to my training, and that gradually took over and became a huge part of my training. And then, of course, parkour exploded around the world, and here we are. But personally, that's kind of how I came to it. It was just a natural progression of my training and sort of seeking to find out who I am and what I could do, And parkour did that better than most things I'd encountered until then.
That's a really interesting statement, I think, particularly when you started with martial arts, because there's clearly a lot of self-improvement and spirituality involved in martial arts. But I think just recently in the last few months, I realized how much of a holistic kind of a whole person background parkour has. And parkour, I guess, for our average listeners, might not be something that they know. I think the big pop culture touching point is the scene in Casino Royale, the opening scene with James Bond. Maybe was where a lot of people were introduced to it. Yep. But can you give us a little taste into how it started and what it is, and why it's more than just jumping from building to building and annoying local police officers?
Yeah, the pop culture side of it, like you say, the sort of and that's obviously been fueled by the media wanting to show the spectacular side of it and the spectacular abilities that you can kind of unleash through parkour. which of course are just our natural potential as humans. There's nothing superhuman about it. But yeah, that's been the focus in the media. But it didn't begin like that at all, and that's only a tiny, tiny bit. That's just the tip of the iceberg with parkour. It's just the showcase side of it. But it began in France, in the suburbs of Paris. Small group of individuals, sort of families, 2 or 3 families and friends. With lots of different influences, a real melting pot of influences from military and martial arts and gymnastics and kind of other physical training methods, and comics and anime as well, and superhero stuff, because they were mainly young men. All those influences came together, tribal stuff as well from New Caledonia with Jan's family. They came together and they sort of formed this group who didn't really know what they were doing, I suppose, but they were training and pushing themselves physically and mentally in their environment, adapting to their urban space. Pretty rough part of Paris, those suburbs, Nice and Evry. And over time, though, they realised that their sort of games, their childhood games and challenges, they didn't stop them like everyone else did. They just carried on doing them, and discovered that there was a discipline there, and that they were doing it, sort of full time. They were just, this is what they did. They went out to do this training, to find these challenges and to adapt to space, and to find out who they were. The first word they gave themselves as a group was Yamakasi, which is a Lingala word that means strong man, strong body, strong spirit. And it was really about finding out what it means to be strong, and how strong can you be. Not just like muscularly strong, but how strong as an individual mentally you can be, ethically as well. Why you're training, what these abilities are for. What's the point of being strong and fit and fast and fearless? What's the point? So, and that's where it came from. And for about 10, 15 years, it was really underground. No one knew about it. And the French authorities kind of didn't like it and vilified it. And then Luc Besson came along in 2000 and made a film with them, featuring the guys. And that sort of put it, in a certain place. And then 2003, there was Jump London, a Channel 4 documentary, and boom, boom, and then Casino Royale in whenever that was, 2006 or something. And kind of, exploded from there. But it started from very kind of humble roots. And just as a progression of very, I suppose, a progression of very old concepts and sort of disciplines in terms of, rites of passage stuff, especially for young men, in terms of finding out what they can do and who they are, and pushing the boundaries and challenging their environment.
Yeah, I think your line there about why, or what can we do with this? Certainly we're making ourselves physically strong, but what's the point? Was why I think I reached out to you. I saw a local news piece on some parkour, a group, I think, in Melbourne, in December sometime, and one of the girls that they were interviewing said, I'm doing this so that I'm ready in case I need to save somebody. And I think we talk about that stuff all the time here, and it's always been mentally, and mentally prepared, whether it's the habit, whether it's the empathy, but I don't think it ever really properly, I properly processed that idea that if you're physically capable, it's a much easier decision. And we've seen, we see all the time people jumping onto the subway tracks in New York City, and what they almost always never realize is that it's quite difficult to lift a body up to shoulder height, and to even jump down there and jump back up again. Yeah. But it also applies to running into a burning building, and that's what this girl was particularly referenced. But also swimming. Yeah. If you're not a strong swimmer, you're not going to be jumping in, and we've talked about that thing before. But this I think parkour too seems very accessible to anybody, and I think I'd like you to talk a bit more about that too, because we do see the whiz bang stuff, the YouTube videos, and Daniel Craig. It does seem superhuman, but it starts off at just normal human, right? There's stepping stones to get to where these people are, and as you say, it's kind of a lifestyle. So can you kind of get into that more? Like, how does the average person start getting into parkour?
Sure. Well, it's not superhuman. No, it's normal human. The fact is that it's normal human. We've just forgotten what it is to be human, because we live in such a a sort of pampered, protective culture, especially in the modern industrialized world, where you don't need to use your potential, so we forget what potential is. All parkour does is remind people, this is what your body can do, and probably this is what your body and mind should be able to do, and this is how you should move, so it's nothing superhuman about it, and therefore it's just a progression from where you begin to those those dizzying heights of being really truly strong, truly functionally fit, capable, fearless, and able to apply your strength, like you say, in any situation. So you start, when we start, beginners, and they come to us, either kids or adults, and some of them might have no physical background, some might have very high level athletic background, but they all will have some sort of weak link, perhaps in their training, either mentally or physically, or maybe they're a good runner but they've got no upper body strength or whatever. And we will look at them as an individual and basically say, well, these are the steps you need to do to sort of fill in those gaps and then progress and learn to apply those strengths. So, for a beginner, it might just be learning how to be mobile again, physically mobile as an adult, learning how to restore mobility to your body and restore the strengths that can support healthy movement, and then starting to apply those skills, in sort of task-oriented training and movement challenges. So you can start off very, very accessibly, ground level. The vast majority of training in parkour is done at ground level. The stuff you see in the movies or for, jumping between buildings or whatever, that's very rare in parkour because it's just, it's a pain in the ass to get up on a building to train up there. Two, you're probably going to get kicked off, so it's going to interrupt your training time. And three, there's not as much to do up there on the tops of buildings. There's much more sort of architecture and good furniture, sort of urban furniture at ground level. So the vast majority, probably 95% of every parkour athlete's training is ground level anyway. So as a beginner, you start there, you can stay there your whole life. You never need to do that stuff if you don't want to. It's not about that. It's about refining your movement skills and just finding out just what you can do. It's really interesting you raised the train track things. A few months ago, one of our senior coaches here, Andy, who's a really great guy, he did exactly that. He was at a tube stop in London, and a drunk guy fell down on the train tracks and was lying there, couldn't get up, and the green light had gone in the at the end of the tube, which means the train is going to be there within 1 minute. So thousands of people on the platform, and they'll just watch. They'll just stand there going, Andy just takes off his bag, jumps down, picks the guy up, chucks him back on the platform, climbs out. About 10 seconds later, the train comes in. So everyone's like screaming and applauding. He just gets his bag and gets in the train and goes home. And that's because he's got the minds. Physically, he knows he can do it, and mentally, he's parkour is very much about preparing you for situations where you have to deal with fear and risk. So for him, it's kind of a no-brainer to, of course, I'm going to do that. And that is, that's the way humans should be. They shouldn't be standing there thinking, oh, this guy's going to die. You should just help. You should get down and help. But you've got to be able to do that. And that requires a harmony of body and mind. So it's not just about being mentally ready. The mind and the body are one thing, right? It's a body-mind. It's not body and mind. It's just body-mind. So they need to reflect each other. If your mind is healthy, your body needs to be healthy too, and vice versa. So, yeah, you've got to find a way to develop both.
Yeah, I've got one more question for you, and then I'll let Ari off the leash because I think he's digested enough now. But I think we need to get your buddy on the show to talk about that experience, because that's sort of the poster child of heroism these days.
Yeah, but he would see it as nothing. He would not see it as heroic. He would just be like, it's just an anecdote related to us the next day when we were training. It's like he wouldn't.
Right, which is very, very much the typical hero as well. I wanted to touch on one more thing about parkour that after being inspired to learn more about it by this girl on the TV, is that it's very much a discipline of practice. That any move is only a valid move if you can do it 5 times in a row. It's not a matter of jumping out and hoping you're going to make the landing. It's doing it over and over and over again. And I think we talk in heroism about practicing, about doing these good things every day so that you're ready. It's an automatic. So can you talk a little bit more about that too? How that sort of permeates the discipline?
Yeah, that's been there right from the start. That philosophy of And it's kind of quite a ruthless, community in parkour, in that you're not really right from the start. You weren't allowed to say you could do X jump or this movement or that, unless you could do it, repeatedly, perfectly, and in any conditions. So in bad weather, in low light, when you weren't wearing your normal training gear, if you could do it under all those conditions, then you had the right to say, I can do that jump. But if you could only pull it off like once and in good weather and when you were feeling particularly fit and in the right shoes, then no, you couldn't say you could do it. So it's very much about repeating it. It's that old line, don't train until you can do something, train until you can't not do it. And that really is the parkour mentality. Is you've got to drill this stuff until it becomes just second nature, because that's what creates real skill, real ability. It's not about luck or just pulling off a reckless motion and walking away from it and raising your hands. It's can you do this thing repeatedly, comfortably, so that you could do it in a high pressure situation, and that requires huge amounts of repetition, huge amounts of good training, sensible training, and getting the mind to the point where it's relaxed with the movement. So you're not just doing it pumped with adrenaline or anything like that, because you can't do this stuff when you're pumped with adrenaline, because your fine motor skills disappear, and then you're not going to make it. So it needs to be relaxed, and the only way to do that is to become very good at it.
Oh, is it my turn now? Do I get to jump in? Yeah, great. So Matt, those were great questions, and listening to Dan's responses, obviously it's got me thinking quite a lot. I am amazed by the number of times that Dan has said the sorts of things that are kind of like our keywords, the things that we talk about all the time. It's uncanny. Especially because coming into this, I knew virtually nothing about parkour. So this is really enlightening for me, and the connections are fascinating to listen to. Dan, I wonder if you could talk a little bit in specifics about training, right? And in particular about you talk about sort of the repetitiveness and so on. But what are some examples of this? What does training look like?
It's a good question. So in parkour, it's a very broad concept, right? So the training can look very different from practitioner to practitioner, and sort of from day to day as a practitioner, which is good, right? Because you don't want to have too much routine in any training protocol, because your body adapts to it pretty quickly, and then you don't get the benefit from it. So you should always be challenging your body by mixing your training routines anyway. But there are sort of staple foundations, I guess, in parkour, kind of fundamental family groups of movement that are trained, pretty religiously at the beginning, especially until you become really comfortable with them. And they are things like what's known as precision or accuracy. So precision jump. So really learning to be very precise with your steps and your landings, so that you have real control and you can move across terrain or obstacles that are perhaps thin or shaky a bit, or not designed to be run on. So precision is kind of a basic. Of course, jumping. So of course, learning power. Learning how to develop power and how to apply it, and then how to absorb the impact as a result of those movements and jumps. So learning, drilling how to land, and the biomechanics of landing, which is actually quite complicated to get right, but that's really, really vital from day one, is learning how to land, because it doesn't really matter how far you can jump if you're not strong enough to land the jump safely. Over time, either you'll get an acute injury there and then, or you'll just wear away the body and get overuse injuries, tendonitis, things like that. So the first thing to do is master the landing biomechanics and develop the strength to absorb impact. So you've got kind of precision training, you've got power development, you've got learning landing techniques, you've got so what's known as passement in French, which means passing obstacles. It's just the basic techniques to overcome obstacles in your path. That can be just vaulting a wall. It can be going up a wall that's too high to vault. It can be going through small gaps. It can be swinging on a bar or a tree branch or whatever and landing on something else. It's known as lâcher in parkour. So there are kind of those fundamental techniques. Learning how to roll to help you disperse the impact from a landing. And rolling techniques and shapes to use as a movement tool as well, to go over obstacles or under obstacles. And then you can kind of get more and more into specific sub-branches of those movement groups. But those are kind of the basic groups that everyone trains a lot. And I suppose overall developing, what we would call like applicable strengths. So learning how to pull your body up and over and onto obstacles just with your arms, and maybe a bit from the legs. But so for us, for example, a pull-up, which is a classic sort of training tool in fitness, fine. But a pull-up is not really, it doesn't really develop a truly applicable strength because it only gets you to here, right? So and if you're going to go up and onto something, which is the idea of movement most of the time, you need to go here and then here and then here. So you need to. That's why the muscle up, what's called the muscle up, which is where you hang on a bar and then pull all the way up, so you end up like that. That's the equivalent of the pull-up in parkour, because that's if you can do a clean muscle up, it means whenever you're hanging on something anywhere, you've got the strength to go from a dead hang to getting up onto that obstacle. So it's a basic save your life tool. So that kind of training is really, really fundamental in parkour, learning that sort of truly functional strength and agility and mobility as well. But that's really a core thing. So training normally revolves around those ideas, but there's huge diversity in it depending on what you want to focus on. It's kind of like being a decathlete, but more. You've got to be able to run fast and sprint, but you've also got to be able to run long distances. You've got to be able to jump high. You've got to be able to jump far. You've got to be able to jump down as well. You've got to be really agile, like a dancer or a gymnast. Be able to move really well through space. You've also got to be really solid, almost like a lifter, to be able to absorb the impacts and stuff. So you've got so much to learn and practice that it keeps you busy. It pretty much keeps you busy, keeps you engaged, and you can never finish that learning process, which is why it's cool, right? There's no sort of collection of techniques you can just go, right, I've done parkour, because it's a concept. So it keeps you going, basically, and it's bloody hard, which is why I like it.
Okay, I have, I think, 2 more questions for you, but there may be more. A couple minutes ago you mentioned risk, which is something we talk about a lot, and you were talking about kind of sort of assessment of risk and thinking through it and managing it and so on. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about that and about sort of the relationship between this idea of sort of risk or knowing about what you're, knowing about risk, managing risk, and then parkour training.
Yeah, well, it's a great question and a subject that's really close to my heart. I do a lot of sort of public talks about risk and the necessity of risk, and trying to understand it. I think the key thing with risk to get your head around first is that is to understand what the word means and not to see it as not to put a negative slant on it. Most people see risk as a negative thing, right? But first of all, you've got to understand the difference between risk and danger, which is a lot of people don't. They'll say, oh, that's risky, when actually what they mean to say is that's dangerous. There's nothing wrong with risk. Okay, risk is really important for the development to be a competent human being. And all you have to do is learn how to manage risk. And the only way you learn how to manage risk is by being exposed to risk. Yeah, that's it. You have to be exposed to risk. So danger is the likelihood of is when you don't have control in a situation. So the situation is no longer about a risk. There's now a high likelihood that a bad consequence is going to occur. That's a dangerous situation. So it's a situation that has risk but no control. Okay, so a healthy risk situation is a situation that has a risk to it, but you have the ability to control that risk and manage it, so the likely outcome is going to be positive. Yeah, and that's absolutely vital for real gains to be made in any industry in the world, in any development, in any field. The real gains, the real advancements are made on that edge of success and failure, that zone. That's where all the real productivity comes from in any discipline for humans. So it's exactly the same with movement training, in that you've got to be on this kind of edge of success and failure, which means there's a risk. The risk might just be that the consequence might just be that you don't pull off the move and you go home not having done the move. That's it. That might be the consequence, right? But or it could be a harder. It could be the consequence could be you get bruised shins, or you look like an idiot in front of your mates, or whatever. There could be a number of different consequences. It doesn't have to be like death. Okay, that's a risk scenario with a high consequence. But even that sort of scenario can be engaged in as long as you have the skill to mitigate the chance of it happening. So it's hugely beneficial. It's seen to be hugely beneficial to engage with risk for a child's upbringing and for an adult to maintain that, and just to learn to manage it. And then the risk decreases, the chance of failure decreases, and what happens is you then, through engaging with those small risks that you can manage through athletic disciplines and movement training and stuff like that, you then mitigate the much larger risks and much more likely negative outcomes that occur from not engaging in those small risks, such as heart disease, liver failure, obesity, postural problems, depression, right, which is a result of lack of movement often. So, and those are the things that tend to screw up and kill most humans, right? Not from failing a jump or getting hurt in an athletic discipline. So you really want to focus. Those are the things you should be worried about. Getting hit by a car, alcohol. Alcohol is the biggest killer in the world, right? Amazing. And yet we're not really worried about that at all. People go out and drink 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pints a night. It's like, well, that's the biggest killer in the world right there. And you're not worried about that at all. But health and safety people sometimes go mad about getting kids to do small jumps and learn to use their body. So it's completely an incorrect perception of risk. And I think it's very important to try and change that perception and restore a kind of managed risk into people's upbringing and people's everyday life.
Thanks. I'm absolutely fascinated by this because what you're talking about, it seems to me, is kind of a creation of a sort of core set of competencies, right? So this is so much in line with the kind of project that Matt and I have been talking about, but we've only tangentially talked about the kind of physical aspect of it. And what you're giving us, what I really appreciate, is that there's both the physical aspect to this, but there's also clearly a kind of mental, philosophical kind of approach here. I'm hearing the kind of underlying philosophy in so much of what you're saying, and that seems to me to be of a huge benefit to people. Even at the very beginning of this, right? My sense, and I don't know. So you tell me. I'm kind of making this up as I go. I'm theorizing about parkour, but I don't know anything about it. But it seems to me that even from the beginning, right? I am in a position where I cannot do the idea of jumping. Terrifies me, and that is a small jump, right? Straight up into the air. But the but the philosophy of this has me so kind of energized that I feel like it's a thing that I would want to try just to get the kind of the benefits that you're talking about. So I really appreciate it. I'll tell you, I'm probably not going to race out and find my local parkour group because I'm still rehabbing a leg injury. But if I wasn't, or in a few months when I'm not, maybe this will be a thing that I do because, we've talked, Matt and I, about the importance of taking CPR classes, right? If you're interested in being the kind of person who can step up and assist, you have to actually feel like you know how to do something, right? And you're talking about knowing how to do something on a very, there's a sort of elemental level to this that I really appreciate. It's not, it's not CPR, but it's all, it's a kind of, it's a whole set of core competencies that I think Matt and I, perhaps haven't thought nearly enough about. And so this is for me, this is really fascinating.
Yeah, I think what your approach is great. That looking for as you say, the core competencies. I discussed this a lot with my friends, and we grew up doing this and thinking about this sort of, creating warrior schools when we were kids, and what skills would you need to train a really competent warrior in this day and age, bearing in mind that it's got to all be contextual, right? So there's no point necessarily learning how to use a sword these days. You've got to be contextual about this, and if you're going to be a survivalist and learn self-protection at this day and age, that means you've got to learn about things like living in a city, crossing roads, you've got to learn about nutrition and how to access decent food when you're in the middle of a very urban environment where you could probably only get really poor quality food. So those are kind of necessary, and things like CPR and whatever. Those are necessary tools for someone who's interested in being an effective human in this day and age. But the base tool if you study survival skills or any of these concepts in real depth, I guess, then what you will encounter is that the people that really get into it, the first thing they realize is my basic tool is my body. Yeah. So that has to be priority number one. That has to be in decent shape. It needs to be functioning. It needs to be able to do everything I need it to do at any given time. It needs to be able to do it for a long time, for many, many years, basically until I die. That's the basic tool. Everything else, all the extra skills, CPR, fighting, survival skills, nutrition skills, technical skills, whatever. All those are great, but they should be built on the basic. They should be built above the basic foundation of being physically and mentally as well capable and willing to try things, to experiment, and to take risks. Because without that base, it doesn't really matter what the rest is. Yeah. So my background is heavily in martial art, and very early on I realized that it doesn't matter. All these guys that have amazing black belt, 7th degree, all this sort of stuff. You see all these teachers, and they're hugely overweight and unfit, right? But they've got a big black belt around their waist, right? Great, they've got great technical skill and knowledge, huge knowledge, okay? But the reality is, if you take that massively overweight, out of shape individual and put him in a combat scenario with a guy who is not skilled technically, but very fit and strong, 9 times out of 10, the fit and strong individual is going to win. So now the idea is to have both, be fit and strong plus technically skilled, right? But having the technical skill and knowledge without the real physical fitness is just stupid, man. It just means you haven't been in that combat situation. You don't understand the reality of it. The reality is you need the basic stuff, which is speed, strength, mobility, endurance, the ability, really doing the stuff. Then learn the technical stuff. So parkour kind of, for me, it's that mental and physical core. Once you've done parkour, once you've challenged yourself in this way, you then realize that you can learn any other skill pretty much, because they're going to be probably less challenging, in terms of viscerally, fear-wise, less challenging than parkour. So once you've done this, you then realize, oh great, I can learn to skydive, I can learn to fight, I can learn to do this, I can learn to, because it's then after that, after parkour, it's kind of all easier. So I think this is a really good thing to help people. But it's not the be-all and end-all. Just doing parkour is not enough, because then you don't have those CPR skills or the fighting skills or skydiving skills or whatever. So you've got to learn that stuff too. I love skydiving.
So Dan, I reached out to you a couple of weeks ago and said, what can a nearly 42-year-old, slightly overweight guy do to start this? And you sent me some videos from Parkour Generations, and I started doing some of the sort of beginning exercises and doing some of the jumps. And my 5-year-old daughter has been joining me, and it's been very interesting because I watched her. She's just started school, and so I've been watching her every day do better on the monkey bars than she did the day before. And this, you mentioned earlier about that, this grew out of, or you transitioned from being a child who's just so confident with their body and trying things and doing things, but you just never stopped doing that when most of us do. And I just wanted to sort of share my experience with doing this stuff, because I think it's important for the people listening. I've got terrible knees historically, and I started doing some of these jumps and aiming for precision and repeatability. And I've been jumping things that I looked at and thought, there's no way I can jump that far. Like, my body doesn't go that far. And then having looked at the way that the body's on the, I'm going to try this, and succeeded. And there's a lot of there's a lot of feel-good factor in that. But it's also, I think, very important. It's a very important lesson for me in we tell ourselves that we can't do certain things. Like, if I was in a situation where I needed to jump that distance that I just jumped, I would have told myself 2 weeks ago that I couldn't possibly do it,
Yeah.
that is too far for me to jump, so I'm not going to jump over there to do whatever I need to do. So it's been very eye-opening for me, and I would say to anybody listening today that it's well worth doing. My body has hurt in many different places as muscles are being used that haven't been used in a long time. Can you give the people listening and watching what you gave me, your website, the YouTube channel, all that sort of stuff, so they can have a look at this stuff too?
Yeah, our central website is parkourgenerations.com. So if you just put Parkour Generations in, we'll come up. And that we've got links to other sites for our, we run sort of education programs, things like that as well, and other websites that go from there. But if you go to parkourgenerations.com, you'll find all the information you need pretty much. We've got pretty big Facebook communities and Twitter and all that sort of stuff. So, and we've got operations around the world. So it's quite easy to find us somewhere, or we'll be able to connect you with someone, probably in your local area. So there's loads of good groups out there all around the world. In every country we go, we're privileged to go to all these countries and train with these guys and run courses with them. And, the communities all over the world are really good and really knowledgeable and really humble communities of practitioners everywhere. Very accessible. They'll welcome anyone in. You don't need to have any level of fitness or strength or athleticism to join them, and they will look after you. And it's kind of the unwritten rule of parkour that you are, no matter how elite you are in the discipline, it's kind of everyone sees it as our duty to help anyone, anyone, a complete beginner, get started. If they come along and see you training, they'll never be turned away by a good practitioner. So yeah, parkourgenerations.com is the central website, but from there you can get to the whole community, and 42 is not old, man. So, the oldest person in our classes in London is 87. The youngest is 18 months, I think, in the family class. So, as long as you're alive, you can train parkour, basically, because it's just, refining your movement from where it is and taking it to the next step, the next step, the next step, the next step. And the fact is, the human body, like the brain, is just immensely good at shit. Okay, it is hugely adaptive, which is why we conquered the planet, right? I suppose it's because we're so adaptable. Our brains are like the most complicated piece of kit in the universe, and the body is just an extension of that. So it's amazing what the human body can do. And all you got to do is look at our high-level athletes to see the limits it can go to, and that means that potential is within all of us. It's just we don't explore it, or we forget it. But yeah, you could, with a bit of training, you will be doing, and everyone in parkour is the same. After their first class, they go away thinking, I never thought I would be able to do that, and that's just the beginning for them. So give them a year, and they'll be doing really incredible stuff. And it's nothing superhuman. It's just what is inside their body now. They're just not using it.
Yep. So I'm going to finish and let Ari have the last word, but I think it definitely comes across to me that the community is a big part of this, and I know that humility is a big part of it as well, which again is one of the core principles of heroism. I mean, heroes will never tell you that they're heroes. So Ari, I'll let you finish us off here.
Okay, yeah. Well, having heard all of this, having heard that Matt is out there jumping, it sounds like in the spring here, when I'm healthy, I should have to get some of these resources and see what I can do. Because look, this is this notion of preparation and training. The ideas that we've been talking about here over the last half hour or so line up so clearly and directly with the ideas that Matt and I have been kind of talking about for the last little while here. Just the notion of preparing yourself, of training for the future, the potential of heroic action, and obviously, I mean, we can hear too, there are benefits along the way, right? So it's not just that someday you might do something, but that all along the way, this training is in fact also sort of good for you and kind of releasing a kind of latent potential inside of everybody. So this has been really helpful. This has been really, for me, eye-opening, really fascinating. Dan, thanks so much. Matt, thank you. I know you both, is it early where you are? Am I right about this? It's early for both of you, right?
No, it's sort of mid-evening for me. I think it's
evening for you. It's early for Matt. Is that right? Okay, good. So Dan, you're fine. You're up at a normal hour. Matt, thanks for getting up and having an early breakfast with us. There's really something cool about talking to, having 3 people on 3 different continents talking about heroism. So I really appreciate this. Thanks to everyone for watching and listening, and we'll be back next time.
Can I jump in and say one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
And this is for you. So you're, and this is a prime example of a change I want to see in your thinking. So you say your leg is injured, so you're not going to start training for 2 or 3 months.
Right.
Get that. You have to throw that thinking out, man. Okay. Your leg is injured, so the next progression step from that is, so I'm going to train my upper body.
Oh, yeah, sure. No, absolutely.
And the parkour guys will show you ways to do that without using your leg. So you can still start developing that strength. No excuse.
No, I appreciate it. You're exactly right. I should update people. My legs are okay. For people who, for longtime fans of this podcast, I tore my Achilles tendon, but certainly I learned exactly what you said at the beginning, right? Not moving, not being able to do anything, all the things I used to be able to do was debilitating. And so as soon as I could, I started lifting weights, doing an upper body weight routine, and that made a huge difference. I'm able to go to the gym. I'm now at the stage where I'm able to run again, so I'm back to kind of a slow jog, but able to sort of do a 5K at this point. Now I just have to pick up speed and work on strengthening and stretching, and once I get sort of the clearance to start moving in the way that you're talking about, then I'll start doing that kind of moving.
Okay, yeah, that's good. It sounds like you've got the concept, and you're already training around the injury.
Yeah, well, it's otherwise it's real trouble. Just sitting on the couch is bad news.
Oh, yeah.
So again, thank you both. This has been really fun. And before long, Matt and I will be posting YouTube videos of all of our jumps. Right, Matt?
Right.
See that. It's been a real pleasure talking to you guys too. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dan.
Take care, guys.